So, what if I told you that the security guards inside your brain, yeah, the very cells that are supposed to be protecting it, could actually be the source of your anxiety? It sounds pretty wild, right? Well, today we're going to unpack some amazing new research that connects the brain's own immune system to this feeling we all know. And believe me, the story starts somewhere you'd never expect. It all begins with these little guys. Now, some of them are grooming themselves. A lot. I mean, so obsessively that they're literally pulling out their own fur and creating these bald patches. This is way more than just a weird habit. It's a huge red flag for compulsive behavior, a sign that something inside their brains has gone seriously haywire. And that right there is the big question. This isn't just some random twitch. It's a very specific, almost self-destructive behavior. So what on earth is going on inside their brains that's pushing them to do this? To get to the bottom of this, we've got to identify the key players. And you might think we'd be looking at neurons, the brain's famous messengers. But surprisingly, our investigation leads us somewhere else entirely. The prime suspects are the brain's own immune cells. Okay, so let's meet the microglia. For the longest time, we kind of thought of them as just the brain's janitors. Their job was to sweep up debris, fight off germs, pretty simple stuff. But it turns out their job description is way more complicated. They're not just the cleanup crew. They're actually involved in managing the brain's entire operation, day in and day out. And here's where it gets really interesting. It turns out not all microglia are created equal. You can think of it like a security force that has two different kinds of guards. Most of them, about 3/4, are your standard issue guards. But then there's a smaller, more specialized group, about 25% of the force, called HOXB8 microglia. And it's this special squad that scientists really started to focus on. So what makes this smaller group so special? Well, it all comes down to one single gene, HOXB8. This gene is only switched on in that 25% minority. It's basically like a genetic name tag that lets scientists spot this particular group in a huge crowd of brain cells. Okay, so the scientists had their prime suspect, these HOXB8 microglia. But in science, hunch isn't good enough. You need proof. You need a smoking gun. And the experiment they designed to get it was, honestly, brilliant. They decided to do a brain cell transplant. Here's how they pulled it off. First, they took a perfectly healthy mouse and created a sort of blank slate by getting rid of all its microglia. Then, they went to one of the overgrooming mice and took only the special HOXB8 microglia, the ones with the faulty gene. And then, they injected only those mutant cells into the healthy mouse's brain. The question was simple. If you transplant just this one type of cell, does the anxious behavior come along for the ride? And wow, the result was just undeniable. Look at this. The mouse on the right, that's the one that got that tiny population of faulty HOXB8 cells. And just like that, it started overgrooming, creating the exact same bald spots we saw in the beginning. Now look at the mouse on the left, which got healthy cells. Totally fine. This was it. This was the smoking gun. It proved, beyond a doubt, that these specific immune cells were directly causing the behavior. I mean, the scientists themselves said it perfectly. They wrote that the experiments establish a direct causal link between these faulty microglia and the anxious behaviors. The key here is causal link. It's not just a coincidence. One thing is causing the other. So case closed on who the culprit is. But that just opens up a brand new question. What's the motive? All right, so we know who did it. Now we need to figure out how they did it. How can these little immune cells have such a massive impact on something as complex as behavior? Well, the answer seems to be all about balance. Think of it like a system, with an accelerator and a brake. So the researchers came up with this really cool accelerator-brake model. The idea is that the two types of microglia are basically working against each other. The big population, the non-HOXB8 cells, they act as the accelerators. They push these grooming and anxiety behaviors up. But that special HOXB8 group, they act as the brakes, pulling those same behaviors back down. For a healthy brain, you need both working together perfectly. Now, any good scientific model has to make a prediction you can actually test. And this one makes a really simple one. It leads to a pretty obvious question, right? What happens if you have a car with only an accelerator and no brakes? You'd expect things to get out of control, fast. And that is exactly what they found. Just look at this data. The mice with a normal mix of cells, or even the mice that had only the brake cells, they groomed a totally normal amount. But the mice they engineered to have only the accelerator cells, whoa, Their grooming time went through the roof, way into what we'd call pathological. This was proof. Without those Hoxbait brake cells, the whole system just spins out of control. So the story seems pretty simple, doesn't it? The brakes are broken, so the car goes way too fast. Case closed. But, science is almost never that neat and tidy. When the researchers dug a little deeper into the data, they found one last, totally surprising twist in the story. So get this. The original mice, the ones with the faulty HOXB gene, were actually worse off than the mice that had no brakes at all. Now wait a second, that doesn't really make sense at first, does it? How can having a broken brake pedal possibly be worse than just having no brake pedal to begin with? To figure this out, we need a quick lesson on gene mutations. There are two main types. The first is called a loss of function. That's simple. The gene is broken, so it just can't do its job anymore. The brake pedal is gone. But the other kind, a gain of function, is much weirder. The faulty gene doesn't just stop working, it starts doing something totally new, and usually something harmful. It's kind of like a brake pedal that, when you press it, randomly slams on the accelerator instead. And that was the key to the whole puzzle. This mutation was a double whammy. It was a loss of function, sure, it totally removed the brakes from the system, but it was also a gain of function. Those faulty cells weren't just useless, they were actively doing something new and harmful, basically pushing the accelerator to the floor. And that's why the problem was so extreme. It wasn't just missing the brakes, it was having a system that was actively working against itself. This whole line of research really changes how we have to think about the brain. It shows us that our immune system isn't just some passive bodyguard, it's an active driver of our behavior, holding both the gas pedal and the brake. And this isn't just about mice. This opens up a whole new door for thinking about things like human anxiety and other mental health conditions. It leaves us with this massive question. If our own immune cells can drive anxiety, what else could they be driving?